The cry before the sleeping city. Dusk had settled upon the quiet city. The last light of day, fading across the sky, seemed to spread a blanket of melancholy. To tell stories of old, Begum Rohima came to sit beside her granddaughter, Isha. Isha's eyes held a world of curiosity. She was always eager to hear tales of the past. Begum Rohima sighed softly. Today, I will tell you a history, Isha, that lies buried in the soil of this city. A history of sorrow. She began to speak of a time long ago when this city was not so silent. There lived a beautiful princess named Kirnamala. The light of her beauty made everything around her shimmer. Her heart was as vast as the sky, and her laughter tinkled like a flowing spring. Everyone in the kingdom loved her. One day, a powerful general of the kingdom became consumed by his desire to possess Kirnala. But the princess did not love him. In his wounded pride and rage, the general hatched a terrible plot. One morning, a blood-stained white cloth was found in Kirnamala's chamber. Rumors spread like wildfire that the princess was of loose character. The people of the kingdom, who had until then revered Kirnamala like a goddess, turned their faces away in disgust. The king, too, heard the slander. Blinded by grief and anger, he banished Kirnamala without any trial. Can you imagine Isha? Begum Rohima paused, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The girl who was so pure, what a terrible accusation was cast upon her. Isha gasped in fear. What happened then, Dadi? Begum Rohima continued. In exile, Kirnamala was alone and helpless. All she had were her tears and the stifled pain in her heart. But there was no bitterness in her soul. She simply could not understand why this had happened to her. Many years later, an old woman returned to the city. Her face was pale and worn, her eyes filled with sorrow. No one recognized her as the lost princess Kirnamala. The old woman wandered through the city's nooks and corners, whispering the story of the conspiracy. But who would believe her? One day, the old woman sat weeping beneath an ancient banyan tree. Suddenly, a young man approached her. His name was Akash, and he traveled in search of truth. When he asked the old woman the reason for her tears, she slowly revealed everything: the blood-stained cloth, the general's greed, and the king's unjust judgment. Akash realized that this old woman was the unfortunate princess Kirnamala. He vowed to bring the truth to light for everyone. Many days passed. Akash worked tirelessly to gather evidence. Finally, after much effort, he found the undeniable proof of the general's wicked deeds. He went to the king and told him the whole truth. But it was too late. Kirnamala had already succumbed to her pain and the weight of the false accusations. But after her death, the people of the kingdom learned the magnitude of their mistake. The general was punished, but Kirnamala's honor could never be restored. Begum Rohima fell silent. The darkness of the night had deepened. Isha gazed at her grandmother with wide, unblinking eyes. You know, Isha, Begum Rohima said again, her voice soft, that blood-stained cloth still remains a deep scar on the pages of this city's history. Every year, on this day, the people of the city weep silently for the innocent princess whose life was ended by a false accusation. Beneath the silence of the sleeping city, the echoes of that cry can still be heard. Isha remained quiet. The poignant story had left a deep impression on her young heart. She understood that history, beyond just fairy tales, held many such tales of sorrow that could still bring tears to our eyes. Beyond the dusty horizon, where thorny bushes and rugged rock formations stretched endlessly, lay Sundown City. Its name, though seemingly mystical, belied a harsh and unforgiving reality, much like nature itself. Life of the residents of this town revolved around the sound of gunfire and the thud of horse hooves. Among them were several notable individuals whose destinies intertwined on one peculiar evening. First, there was Old Jack, with his cowboy hat, a furrowed brow, and an old rifle in hand. Jack was both the protector and the enigma of Sundown City. It was rumored that many years ago, he had been a notorious outlaw, but after some unknown incident, he changed his ways and began living as the town's guardian. Yet, his past always remained shrouded in mystery. Next was Callie, the owner of the town's only saloon. With her reddish hair, sharp gaze, and sweet smile, Callie was the heart and soul of Sundown City. Even in dire situations, she never lost her courage and always tried to bring smiles to people's faces. However, beneath her smile lay a deep sorrow that she never let anyone see. One day, a stranger arrived in Sundown City, Eagle Eye Dan. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, and his hand with a gun was lightning fast. It was clear from Dan's demeanor that he had come with a specific purpose. He seemed somewhat worried while checking his horse's saddle outside the town, as if he had lost something valuable. That very day, wanted posters appeared on the outskirts of the town, featuring a notorious bandit named Bud Gayson Urine. Many townsfolk flinched at the sight of his burning eyes on the poster. It was said that wherever Bud Gayson went, he brought destruction. Countless murders and robberies were linked to his name. Just a few days later, Bud Gayson Urine's gang truly attacked Sundown City. They were far superior in number and armed with advanced firearms. Although initially terrified, the townspeople, led by Old Jack, stood their ground. Callie closed her saloon doors, comforting those who sought shelter inside, while Eagle Eye Dan moved around the town's nooks and crannies, keeping an eye on the bandits' movements. The gunfight began. The air grew heavy with dust and the smell of gunpowder. Jack, with his old rifle, accurately picked off bandits one by one. Callie, from her saloon window, took opportune shots. But the bandits were too numerous, and slowly, they began to take control of the town. Just then, Eagle Eye Dan appeared as a savior. He swiftly leaped from one rooftop to another, raining bullets down on the bandits. With his impeccable aim, one bandit after another fell to the ground. Inspired by Dan's courage and skill, the townspeople found new resolve. But the fight was not yet over. Bud Gayson Urine, with that terrifying gaze seen on the poster, had been hiding, waiting to witness the town's downfall. When he saw that his gang was almost defeated, he stepped forward himself. In his hand was a gleaming revolver, and in his eyes, the fire of ferocity. Bud Gayson aimed his gun directly at Callie and fired. Callie closed her eyes in fear, but the bullet did not hit her. In a split second, Eagle Eye Dan rushed forward, pushing Callie out of the way, and took Bud Gayson's bullet himself. Before Dan fell to the ground, he drew his own revolver and shot Bud Gayson in the chest. Bud Gayson let out a horrific scream and collapsed, the fiery gaze in his eyes slowly extinguishing. Eagle Eye Dan was also severely wounded. Callie rushed to him and began to cry, holding him. Dan managed a weak smile and said, "I think I found what I was looking for." Then his breath faded. The people of Sundown City celebrated their victory, but a deep sorrow filled their hearts. They realized that eagle-eyed beyond the dusty horizon, where thorny bushes and rugged rock formations stretched endlessly, lay Sundown City. Its name, though seemingly mystical, belied a harsh and unforgiving reality, much like nature itself. Life for the residents of this town revolved around the sound of gunfire and the thud of horse hooves. Among them were several notable individuals whose destinies intertwined on one peculiar evening. First, there was Old Jack, with his cowboy hat, a furrowed brow, and an old rifle in hand. Jack was both the protector and the enigma of Sundown City. It was rumored that many years ago, he had been a notorious outlaw, but after some unknown incident, he changed his ways and began living as the town's guardian. Yet, his past always remained shrouded in mystery. Next was Callie, the owner of the town's only saloon. With her reddish hair, sharp gaze, and sweet smile, Callie was the heart and soul of Sundown City. Even in dire situations, she never lost her courage and always tried to bring smiles to people's faces. However, beneath her smile lay a deep sorrow that she never let anyone see. One day, a stranger arrived in Sundown City, Eagle Eye Dan. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, and his hand with a gun was lightning fast. It was clear from Dan's demeanor that he had come with a specific purpose. He seemed somewhat worried while checking his horse's saddle outside the town, as if he had lost something valuable. That very day, Wanted posters appeared on the outskirts of the town, featuring a notorious bandit named Bud Gayson Urine. Many townsfolk flinched at the sight of his burning eyes on the poster. It was said that wherever Bud Gayson went, he brought destruction. Countless murders and robberies were linked to his name. Just a few days later, Bud Gayson Urine's gang truly attacked Sundown City. They were far superior in number and armed with advanced firearms. Although initially terrified, the townspeople, led by Old Jack, stood their ground. Callie closed her saloon doors, comforting those who sought shelter inside, while Eagle Eye Dan moved around the town's nooks and crannies, keeping an eye on the bandits' movements. The gunfight began. The air grew heavy with dust and the smell of gunpowder. Jack, with his old rifle, accurately picked off bandits one by one. Callie, from her saloon window, took opportune shots. But the bandits were too numerous, and slowly, they began to take control of the town. Just then, Eagle Eye Dan appeared as a savior. He swiftly leaped from one rooftop to another, raining bullets down on the bandits. With his impeccable aim, one bandit after another fell to the ground. Inspired by Dan's courage and skill, the townspeople found new resolve. But the fight was not yet over. Bud Gayson Urine, with that terrifying gaze seen on the poster, had been hiding, waiting to witness the town's downfall. When he saw that his gang was almost defeated, he stepped forward himself. In his hand was a gleaming revolver, and in his eyes, the fire of ferocity. Bud Gayson aimed his gun directly at Callie and fired. Callie closed her eyes in fear, but the bullet did not hit her. In a split second, Eagle Eye Dan rushed forward, pushing Callie out of the way, and took Bud Gayson's bullet himself. Before Dan fell to the ground, he drew his own revolver and shot Bud Gayson in the chest. Bud Gayson let out a horrific scream and collapsed, the fiery gaze in his eyes slowly extinguishing. Eagle Eye Dan was also severely wounded. Callie rushed to him and began to cry, holding him. Dan managed a weak smile and said, "I think I found what I was looking for." Then his breath faded. The people of Sundown City celebrated their victory, but a deep sorrow filled their hearts. They realized that Eagle Eye Dan had sacrificed his life to save their town. What he had been looking for while checking his horse's saddle was perhaps the hope for a new life, which he had found among the people of Sundown City. Old Jack silently. The moon hung like a skeletal fingernail in the inky sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the dimly lit bedroom. Elias, a man whose hair was now more salt than pepper, lay rigidly in his bed, a landscape of tangled sheets beneath him. His eyes, bloodshot and burning like twin embers, stared fixedly at the ceiling. Each creak of the old house, each rustle of leaves outside the window, amplified in the suffocating silence of the night. Sleep, that elusive balm, remained stubbornly out of reach. He tried everything: warm milk, chamomile tea, counting imaginary sheep until the woolly creatures blurred into an indistinguishable mass. He'd even resorted to the ancient family remedy of tying a clove of garlic to his big toe, a practice his wife, before she passed, had always sworn by. Tonight, however, even the potent aroma of garlic seemed to mock his wakefulness. The old pendulum clock in the hallway chimed the quarter hour, a somber note echoing through the stillness. Elias squeezed his eyes shut, willing his mind to empty, to surrender to the sweet oblivion of slumber. But his thoughts were like restless insects, buzzing and flitting around, refusing to be silenced. Memories of the day, a minor squabble with the shopkeeper, the worry about his grandson's upcoming exams, the nagging ache in his knee, replayed themselves endlessly, each scene sharper and more vivid than the last. He shifted onto his side, the rough cotton of his nightshirt scratching against his skin. The pillow felt lumpy and unyielding. He punched it a few times, trying to reshape it into a more comfortable form, but it remained stubbornly resistant. A sigh escaped his lips, a sound heavy with frustration and fatigue. It wasn't always like this. There were nights when sleep descended swiftly, a gentle embrace that carried him away to peaceful realms. But lately, these nights of restless torment had become more frequent, stretching into what felt like an eternity. The lack of sleep was beginning to take its toll. He felt sluggish and irritable during the day, his thoughts clouded, his concentration fractured. He glanced towards the window, where the faint outline of the moon was still visible. The night seemed endless, a vast expanse of darkness stretching out before the promise of dawn. A wave of loneliness washed over him, a familiar ache in the quiet hours when the world was hushed and still. He missed his wife, her soft breathing beside him, the comforting weight of her hand in his. She had always been his anchor, his solace in the sleepless hours. He tossed and turned again, pulling the thin blanket closer, then pushing it away in a sudden wave of heat. His mind raced, jumping from one worry to another, each one fueling his agitation. He thought of his responsibilities, his unfinished tasks, the ever-present anxieties of daily life in their small Bangladeshi village. The rising cost of rice, the unpredictable weather threatening the crops, the distant rumblings of political unrest. They all seemed magnified in the darkness. He imagined the rest of the village, nestled in their slumber, finding respite from the day's toils. He pictured the fishermen sleeping soundly before their early morning journey on the river, the farmers gathering strength for the demanding work in the fields, the children dreaming innocent dreams. Why was he, Elias, condemned to this wakeful purgatory? A sudden sound from outside made him jump. It was just a stray dog howling at the moon, but in his heightened state of anxiety, it sounded like a mournful omen. He held his breath, listening intently, but the village remained quiet once more. He closed his eyes again, focusing on his breathing, trying to slow the frantic rhythm of his heart. Inhale, exhale, but his mind refused to cooperate, conjuring images of the ceiling, the walls, the darkness that pressed in around him. Elias knew he needed sleep. His body ached for it, his mind craved the release. But sleep, like a shy and skittish creature, refused to be caught. He was trapped in the liminal space between wakefulness and dreams, a prisoner of his own restless mind, yearning for the oblivion that remained just beyond his grasp in the long, unforgiving hours of the night. The night stretched on, and Elias, weary and wide-eyed, remained a silent testament to the tyranny of sleeplessness, the weaver of forgotten threads. In a small, unassuming village nestled beside the Padma River, lived an old woman named Rohima. Her face was a road map of wrinkles, each line telling a silent story of seasons past, of joy and sorrow interwoven like the threads in her loom. Rohima was the village's weaver of Nakshi Kanta, the traditional embroidered quilts of Bengal. But her creations were more than just blankets. They were repositories of memory, each stitch a whisper of a life lived, a love shared, a loss mourned. As the years passed, the vibrant colors of her earlier kantas had softened, the intricate patterns becoming more abstract, like dreams fading at the edges. Her eyesight wasn't what it used to be, her hands trembled slightly, but her spirit, the wellspring of her art, remained undimmed. However, a creeping sadness had begun to settle over her, as if a vital thread in her own life was slowly unraveling. The reason for her sorrow was the fading tradition of Nakshi Kanta itself. The younger generation, drawn to the allure of modern fabrics and fast-paced city life, had little interest in the slow, deliberate art of embroidery. The stories that once flowed from the needles of mothers and grandmothers onto the cloth were being replaced by the fleeting narratives of television and the internet. Rohima felt like the last keeper of a sacred language, a language that was slowly being forgotten. One sweltering afternoon, as Rohima sat hunched over her ancient loom, her fingers fumbling with a particularly stubborn thread, a young girl named Leela hesitantly approached her hut. Leela was different from the other children in the village. While they chased kites and played in the dusty fields, Leela often sat quietly by the riverbank, observing the intricate patterns of the water's flow or the delicate veins on a fallen leaf. "Dottie, grandmother," Leela began, her voice soft as the rustle of jute leaves. "I see you weaving. What are you making today? Rohima looked at the girl. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a flicker of warmth. She hadn't had a curious visitor in a long time. Just an old piece, Leela. Trying to finish what my own grandmother started. Leela sat beside her, her gaze fixed on the half-finished kanta spread across the loom. It was a tapestry of faded blues and greens, depicting scenes of village life from a time long past. Women fetching water from the pond, farmers tilling the land, boats sailing along the river. But some parts were incomplete, the threads hanging loose, the stories unfinished. It's beautiful, Leela whispered, tracing a faded lotus with her finger. It looks like a story. Rohima smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. It is, my dear. Every kanta tells a story. This one is about the year the great storm came and changed everything. Over the next few weeks, Leela became a regular visitor to Rohima's hut. She sat quietly, watching the old woman's gnarled fingers dance across the fabric, listening intently as Rohima recounted the tales woven into the threads, stories of love and loss, of festivals and famines, of the enduring spirit of their village. Leela wasn't just listening, she was remembering. As Rohima spoke, images bloomed in her young mind, vivid and real, as if she herself had witnessed these events. She saw the fear in the villagers' eyes during the storm, the joy of the harvest festival, the quiet sorrow of a mother who had lost her child. One day, Leela asked Rohima, "Dottie, can you teach me?" Rohima's heart skipped a beat. It had been so long since anyone had expressed interest in learning her craft. Her eyes welled up with unshed tears. "My eyes are not so good anymore, Leela. My hands are shaky." "I will help you," Leela said with a determined glint in her eyes. "You can tell me the stories, and I will learn to weave them with you." And so, an unlikely partnership began. Rohima, with her fading vision and trembling hands, guided Leela, her young fingers nimble and eager to learn. Rohima shared the secrets of the stitches, the kanta, the four, the intricate chadai, and more importantly, she shared the stories, the emotions, the very soul of Nakshi Kanta. Leela proved to be a quick and dedicated student. She listened intently to Rohima's instructions, her needle moving with surprising precision. Together, they worked on the unfinished kanta, Leela carefully filling in the missing threads, guided by Rohima's memories and the faded outlines. As they worked, something magical began to happen. The old stories, whispered by Rohima and woven by Leela, seemed to come alive again. The colors, though faded on the older parts of the kanta, seemed to gain a new vibrancy where Leela's needle had passed. The spirit of the ancestors, the joys and sorrows of generations past, seemed to re-emerge from the fabric. The other villagers, who had long dismissed Nakshi Kanta as an old-fashioned pastime, began to notice the transformation. They saw Leela sitting beside Rohima, her young head bent in concentration, her needle flashing in the sunlight. They saw the beauty of the unfinished kanta, the way it seemed to breathe with forgotten life. Curiosity grew, and soon, other young girls started to gather around Rohima's hut, watching Leela work, listening to the stories. Inspired by Leela's dedication, some of them asked Rohima to teach them too. Rohima's heart swelled with a joy she hadn't felt in years. The forgotten threads were being picked up again. The stories were being retold, not just in words, but in the intricate patterns of the quilts. The tradition, which she had feared was dying, was being reborn in the nimble fingers and eager hearts of the new generation. Leela, the quiet girl who loved to observe the world, had become the weaver of forgotten threads, not just in the kanta she created, but in the hearts of her community. She had reminded them of the beauty of their heritage, the power of their stories, and the enduring magic that can be woven, stitch by careful stitch, from the fabric of memory. And Rohima, the old weaver, knew that her legacy, the vibrant tapestry of their village's history, would continue to be woven for generations to come. Once upon a time, in the dusty, sun-scorched lands of the Wild West, there was a notorious outlaw named Bud Gayson Yururine. His name echoed through the canyons and saloons, a whisper of fear and a legend in the making. Bud wasn't just any bandit. Rumors claimed his eyes glowed with an unholy fire, a mark of a pact made with shadows in the deepest caverns. The wanted posters plastered across every town bore a stark image of a man with a wild, untamed beard and eyes that indeed seemed to pierce through the paper itself. Our story begins in the small, beleaguered town of Redemption Gulch. The townsfolk lived under a perpetual cloud of anxiety, ever wary of Bud Gayson's next raid. Their once vibrant community was now subdued, their laughter stifled by the looming threat. Among them lived a young woman named Clara, fiercely independent and possessing a spirit as fiery as the desert sun. Clara ran the town's only general store after her father's passing. She was the heart of Redemption Gulch, her resilience a beacon of hope in their troubled times. One sweltering afternoon, as the sun beat down mercilessly, a group of dusty travelers stumbled into Redemption Gulch. They were a motley crew. Jedediah, a grizzled old prospector with tales etched on his weathered face. Silas, a quiet and observant man with a knack for tinkering with machines. And a charismatic but shifty-eyed gambler known only as the Serpent. They claimed to be passing through, but there was a palpable tension in their demeanor, a hidden agenda that Clara couldn't quite decipher. As the travelers settled in the town's meager saloon, a commotion erupted outside. A lone rider galloped into town, his face pale with terror. "Bud Gayson," he gasped, pointing back the way he came. "He's coming this way. They say he's got a whole gang with him this time." Panic seized Redemption Gulch. The townsfolk scrambled to barricade their homes and businesses, their fear turning into a desperate resolve to protect what little they had. Clara, though frightened, felt a surge of defiance. She wouldn't let Bud Gayson terrorize her town any longer. Meanwhile, the travelers in the saloon exchanged knowing glances. Jedediah clutched a worn leather-bound map. Silas nervously adjusted something hidden beneath his coat, and the Serpent's eyes gleamed with anticipation. It was clear they knew more than they were letting on about Bud Gayson's impending arrival. As dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, the ominous sound of approaching horses echoed through the stillness. Bud Gayson Yururine and his gang descended upon Redemption Gulch like a pack of wolves. They were a rough and menacing bunch, armed to the teeth and with a hunger for plunder in their eyes. Bud, a towering figure with a thick, fiery red beard and those unsettling eyes, surveyed the town with a cruel smirk. Well, he drawled, his voice a low rumble. "Looks like we've got ourselves a little lamb waiting to be fleeced." The gang charged into the town, their gunfire shattering the fragile peace. The townsfolk, though outnumbered, fought back with surprising courage, defending their homes and families. Clara, armed with her father's old shotgun, stood firm behind the counter of her store, taking aim at any outlaw who dared to approach. Amidst the chaos, the travelers revealed their true intentions. Jedediah unfurled his map, revealing a hidden passage leading out of Redemption Gulch. Silas unveiled a cleverly disguised Gatling gun, which he expertly positioned to provide cover fire. And the Serpent, surprisingly agile, darted through the streets, sowing confusion among the outlaws. It turned out that these travelers were not mere wanderers. They were bounty hunters, each with their own reasons for wanting to bring down Bud Gayson Yururine. Jedediah had lost his claim to Bud's treachery. Silas's family had been victimized by the outlaws' gang, and the Serpent, despite his shady demeanor, had a personal vendetta against Bud. A fierce gunfight ensued. Bullets whizzed through the air, and the dusty streets became a battleground. Clara, inspired by the bravery of the bounty hunters and the resilience of her fellow townsfolk, fought with unwavering determination. She even managed to take a shot at Bud Gayson himself, grazing his arm and earning a furious glare from the outlaw leader. The fight raged on until dawn broke, casting long shadows across the ravaged town. One by one, Bud Gayson's gang members fell, their reign of terror finally coming to an end in the dusty streets of Redemption Gulch. Cornered and wounded, Bud Gayson faced the combined might of the bounty hunters and the townsfolk. In a final, desperate move, Bud lunged at Clara, his eyes burning with an unholy light. But before he could reach her, Silas's Gatling gun roared to life, riddling the outlaw with a volley of bullets. Bud Gayson Uriurine, the terror of the Wild West, fell silent in the dust. A collective sigh of relief swept through Redemption Gulch. The nightmare was finally over. The townsfolk emerged from their barricaded homes, their faces etched with exhaustion, but their eyes shining with newfound hope. Clara, standing amidst the debris, looked at the bounty hunters with gratitude. "You saved us," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Jedediah smiled, his weathered face crinkling at the corners. "We had our own reasons, Miss Clara, but it was your town's spirit that truly turned the tide." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a golden glow over Redemption Gulch, the townsfolk began the arduous task of rebuilding. The scars of the battle would remain, but so would the memory of their courage and resilience. And Clara, the heart of Redemption Gulch, knew that their town, though shaken, was finally on the path to healing and a brighter future, free from the shadow of Bud Gayson Uriurine. The legend of the glowing-eyed outlaw would forever be a part of their history, a reminder of the day Redemption Gulch truly earned its name.